He's a best-selling author. His new book is called The Baby Boomer's Guide to a Rockin' and Rollin' Retirement. Good morning, Danny Smith. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Good morning, Larry and Robin, and a rock and rollin' good morning to all your listeners down in Florida.
And just one quick note. Robin pointed out that the audio on the live stream video thing is not working as far as the guest sound, which is absolutely true. There's something up with that. We'll figure that out later. But the podcast that will result later on, I'm told, will sound perfect. So if you're somehow being frustrated by this, I apologize. But if you just give us till 2 o'clock, you'll hear it in the recorded version. You'll be able to hear Danny and Charles Davis and whoever else we have on this morning. Mm-hmm. So are you in Ohio right now, Danny?
I'm up just west of Cleveland, Ohio, the birthplace of rock and roll and the home of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, there you go. And you were a rock. Did you grow up in that area?
Well, I did. I grew up in this area, and of course, I'm a baby boomer, so I'm a child of the 60s and what we consider the golden age of rock and roll and the British invasion and all that good stuff.
And when you were that age, when you were like the Woodstock age, I guess you would say, I don't know if that's too far back for you, but were you good with money back then?
Well, I didn't have any money to be good with. So, that kind of motivates you. My dad died suddenly in 1955, left my mom and my two brothers and myself with very little in assets, and I guess that's kind of what motivated me later in life to do what I do today to help, prevent that kind of a crash and burn from other families, and kind of motivates me every day to keep on going. And my love of classic rock and roll, I just thought I'd connect the dots in my book and kind of help people enjoy planning for their retirement, but in a fun way, and maybe do a little reminiscing at the same time.
Oh, neat. And what kind of, what rock and roll were you listening to back then, and do you still listen to the same stuff?
Well, I do. I guess I'm a victim of my past, but of course we grew up with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and the Beach Boys, and of course just a few miles west of here would be Detroit with the great Motown sound. So that's kind of left an indelible mark on me, and what I enjoy, and my wife and I, and anytime we travel, we've been blessed to travel to many places, we always check to see if there's any classic rock bands appearing or any cover bands that we can kind of go back and reminisce. I really think that rock and roll brings out the youth in all of us. I think you guys have some music in your background, so maybe you'd agree that when the music starts to play, you can kind of flip the switch off from whatever's going on in your life today and enjoy a little bit and kind of reminisce of our youth.
Absolutely, and because the music affected me similarly to the way it did you, that means we find ourselves in music stores quite often and looking at guitars and trying them out, and then looking at the price tag and putting them back. So I think I can connect our love of music with our need for money simply by telling you this one little story. I went to the local guitar shop not too long ago, actually, probably a couple years ago now, but I'm 62, so I'm kind of probably the same age or close to your age. Anyway, so the guitar shop guy, who also looks, by the way, up in age.
Yeah, he's still got his ponytail.
He says, you want to hear a great guitar? Here, sit down with this one. It was an acoustic Martin. And I sat down with it, and I said, oh, my gosh, this is such a beautiful sounding guitar. I looked at the price tag. It was $2,500. I said, yeah, never mind. Mm-hmm. It just seemed out of my range. So maybe you could help me out. Is it too late to start?
Well, I have a saying, it's never too soon to begin, and it's never too late to start over again. And the thing to do is to have a plan and try to figure out, when people come in to talk to me or they say, Danny, what's the first thing that we ought to do to start planning? And I think the first thing is just to sit down with an advisor and try to figure out what it is you're trying to do. I mean, everybody is on the same day we're on today, which is July the 31st?
Uh-huh. Yes.
We got the rest of our lives ahead of us, and it might be a good idea to have a little planning for that. And as you guys know, with your music background, you got to rehearse before you go on stage. And in planning, I think it's the same way. We sit down and try to rehearse what might lie in store in our futures, and hopefully that's a lot of good things, but there may be some sad things or some catastrophic things, and try to plan for them.
Where's a good place to begin? Well, let me ask you a different thing first. Does what is true today, as far as investing money, look similar to what was true 40 years ago, or did the whole world change so that an investment today is not the same as it was 40 years ago?
Well, I mean, I can't say for sure what my frame of reference was 40 years ago. All I remember back then was gas was 29 cents a gallon, and you could buy a six-pack of Stroh's beer, which was brewed up in Detroit, Michigan, for about $1.25. So that's definitely changed, because nothing's that price anymore. But I really believe, and I write about this in my book, it's actually in chapter 1 of my book, which is Time Is On My Side, from the old Rolling Stones tune. And, you know, it's really beginning as early as you can. It's not the amount of money, Larry and Robin, as much as it is the amount of time and dedication that you have. And anyone interested, by the way, can read about my experience with money and Time Is On My Side, chapter 1 of my book, at www.rockinrollinretirement.com, just like it sounds, rockinrollinretirement.com. You get a complimentary chapter of the book. You don't have to pay for it. There's nothing to do but log on to that and read that and see if you can have a takeaway, and then see if it makes sense to move forward.
Well, self-discipline has always been an issue for me when I start putting money away, because then I'll start putting money away, and then when my children were growing up, I'd say, ooh, let's go here. We're going, you know, here, there, and everywhere. And then I feel, okay, next paycheck, I'll put the money back, but I never do. So how can you instill in me that self-discipline regimen?
Well, I would, and I think that's a great point, Robin. I would say that the fundamental of any plan, whether it's a business plan or a personal plan, what we do is we begin with a reasonable budget. We want the people we work with to come in and show us where their income stream will come from in retirement. That would probably be Social Security or something through public employment. And also, if you have a pension, which really that's becoming a dinosaur in terms of retirement plans. But we look at your income potential in retirement, and then we project what your expenses may be. And we include in your expenses what I call in my book the risk of the great unknown, and that is future healthcare costs. We really don't know what those costs will be, if we're going to need some type of care. We've probably all had family members or friends that ended up going through thousands of dollars, who knows, for that care as they get older. And I believe firmly, guys, that the best way I know of to minimize the financial dangers that come with aging is to plan for them in advance. Plan in advance, see what options may be available, and starting off with a reasonable budget, a dedicated budget, is just a good way to begin.
Now, does that incorporate insurance? I'm guessing insurance is probably the way most people plan for or prepare for bad health.
Well, that's another factor that we have to bring into the loop. For example, in my experience, over the years, probably up until about 10 years ago, guys, people were retiring before 65. 65 is a magic number. I don't know why that is, because people can retire, particularly baby boomers, at any time we want to, or some baby boomers retire and then go back to work, do something else. But one reason people are not retiring as young as they used to is simply the fact that employers no longer offer legacy benefits like, lifetime health care costs. And in many cases, people just don't work at the same place long enough to get any type of a legacy benefit. So you have to pay for your own health insurance until you turn 65, when you can go on Medicare, which is far less expensive and frankly, in most cases, more comprehensive. Today here in Northern Ohio, a person who's between the ages of 60 to 64 years old would pay anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 to $13,000 a year for health insurance, and that might be a deductible of $4,000 or $5,000. My wife is 61. We pay an astronomical amount for her health insurance. I'm already 67, so I get a better deal because I'm on Medicare. So you're absolutely right. Planning for that great unknown, the cost of health care before retirement in terms of what your insurance is going to cost you, and then after retirement is having some kind of a plan in case a catastrophic event happens. We don't want one bad day to become a bad life when it comes to a healthcare event.
Wow. Well, that is good advice. Let me take a little break. We'll be right back. Danny Smith is with us. His book is called The Baby Boomer's Guide to a Rockin' and Rollin' Retirement. I like the fact that he's mixed two things that I like, Robin, music and money.
That's right.
All right, we'll take a little break and be right back.
Possible.
All right, about 12 minutes before 10 o'clock, before we get back to Danny Smith, I have to give you an update on Tropical Storm Emily. Are you surprised, if you're just tuning in, to hear that there's a tropical storm named Emily? Not only is there a tropical storm named Emily, but it is crossing the state of Florida as we speak. Here in Ocala, you don't see a peep of it because it's not here. It starts around Tampa and pretty much goes down to the bottom of the state, the southernmost part of the state, and is crossing the state as I speak. I believe they determined it was a tropical storm at 8 a.m. this morning. When I say they, I mean the National Weather Service. So it's going to be very brief, very short, and probably won't affect us at all unless, and here's the big unless, you're traveling south. If you're heading to Tampa, you might want to wait. Give it a couple of hours. It should be gone. I mean, this is one of those weird, very quick tropical storms. And then once it gets out into the Atlantic Ocean, then who knows what could happen. You never know. Sometimes these things boomerang. It might make its way up to the Carolinas. But right now, it is in the southern half of the state. Pretty much, it looks like the hardest area is Sarasota, Naples, Everglades City, Fort Lauderdale's probably getting battered. So just so you know, if you're heading south, it's down that way. Just don't go yet. Just wait a little bit. All right, Danny Smith is on the phone. This is one thing we have to worry about in Florida, Danny. And speaking of money and insurance, I mean it's a huge issue. If suddenly there's a hurricane, you got to make sure you're prepared financially as well.
Well, you know, I've got some rentals down in the Florida area, and I've been through hurricanes with them in the past, so you don't need to remind me about how devastating that can be, and our thoughts and prayers to all the people who are in the path of that storm.
Yeah.
But that's just another area that we have to prepare for. I know that if you put a roof on a house in Florida now, at least in where my area down there, you have to make sure it's a hurricane roof, which is again a good idea to plan ahead and have something safe and secure that might get you through the storm and weather the storm that is, and having a good plan for your retirement or whatever it is you're trying to do is also a good way to kind of put a secure roof on your planning.
I like that metaphor. Yeah, and absolutely right. So does the book take us by the hand? Is the book for the person who never invested anything? Maybe they didn't even have a savings account?
I think the book's for anyone who first wants to reminisce and hear some of my personal stories and how they can relate to everyone's life. So I really wrote it as kind of a primer for anyone who's interested in kind of, thinking about things categorically. I mean, in music, you've got to kind of write the song and you've got to produce the song. I mean, there's a system that goes in, and you just don't show up at the studio one day and record that that million copy seller. A lot of time and effort goes into that. So my book would be for younger people. It would be for professionals. It would be for business owners. Anyone who wants to have a frame of reference in order to get started. Remember that I write about in my book that the biggest nemesis to success, guys, is procrastination. Because either you never get started or you get started too late. And I think sometime reading a book or listening to a radio program, some of the people you have on your station I see are very informative. It might give you just the impetus or just a gentle nudge to get started. And having, in my view, having an advisor that can help you along is really just a kind of a way to take a lot of the confusion out of things and also to kind of keep you on track. There's a great Bob Dylan tune. He wrote a tune called "All Along the Watchtower," which was really, really well by Jimi Hendrix. And the words go, "There's just too much confusion. I can't get no relief." Well, one challenge that we have as advisors is helping people process all the information and misinformation that's out there and turn it into knowledge, because information is not knowledge. And information overload causes stagnation. It happens all the time in our computers when they get overloaded or they get backed up, and then nothing works. We've probably all had that happen, and that's not a good thing. So I'll give you an example. In my life, I have successfully gone through cancer treatment. I'm very proud and grateful to say.
Oh, good for you.
When I found out I had a type of oral cancer, I went on the internet and I learned everything I could about this type of cancer. I learned about the treatment. I learned from other people who had gone through this very severe neck radiation that I had to do. But when it came time to getting treated and when it came time to turn it over to the experts, that's what I did. I had two great oncologists. I had help from the people up here at the Mercy Cancer Center, God bless them, to help me through. So there's a time to gather information, and then when you turn it over to the professionals, whether it's in the medical profession or the music profession or my profession, that's where you can take all that information and kind of filter it down so that there's knowledge, so you know what's in store for you, you know the right questions to ask.
Right.
I firmly believe that, and that's how I like to work with it.
Let me ask you this: how important is it for us to, on a day-to-day basis, pay attention to the stock market, pay attention to what the government is doing regarding our banking laws and things like that? Because most of us don't. I mean, most of us we hear a little bit of it, and then we kind of have our own lives to distract us. Well, how important is it to pay attention to that?
Well, that's a good question. I'd pay a lot more attention to what the government's doing than what the market's doing every hour. I mean, if you watch what the market does every hour, that's kind of like getting on a scale every hour and weighing yourself and think that somehow you're going to lose weight by doing that.
Right.
If you're in something like that, that's for the long run. But I do think that sometimes, and I don't speak from a political perspective, but since you asked the question, sometimes governments can do things that seem to be on the face of it, the right thing, and then you have the law of unintended consequences where we find out later that maybe some law or some rule has negative consequences, and that can really affect things. And again, for younger people, I would remind anyone that one of the biggest nemesis that younger people have, and I again write about this in my book, will be future taxes. The government right now has a debt of over $20 trillion. Somebody's going to have to pay that.
That's it, yeah.
Probably going to be people younger than we are, and that's always got to be a concern that we deal with, because I've yet to hear anyone say, oh, by the way, here's how I'm going to manage to pay that off. So, yes, I think that certain things need to be paid attention to, and read the paper, listen to podcasts, listen to shows like yours. And
Danny Smith is our guest. I wanted to allow you to speak to some of our listeners. So if you're okay with taking calls, I'd like to take some of them.
All right.
Good morning. You're on the air with Danny Smith.
Good morning, Mr. Smith. I played by the rules all these years. I'm on the downhill side to 80, and with what's going on in our government and how the interest rates are today, it's absolutely boggles my mind. I try to stay as careful as I can, especially after the 08 episode, and I say the two administrations have done more to undermine the middle class than any depression or recession or whatever since. And I just can't understand how these people can say 1/10 of 1% is okay when after 1929, when the banks reopened, was it 33, 34, they started off paying 1%, and some banks actually 2%. When you compare that with today's interest rates on accounts, it's absolute disgrace. And as far as I'm concerned, Bernanke and Yellen should be hung from the yardarm before noon. But anyway, I was wondering if you had any suggestions. I'll hang up and listen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the call. Danny?
Sure. I can understand. I hear the frustration in your voice, sir. And it would be way beyond the scope of this call today for me to go into reasons that interest rates are low and whether they're being kept low because of what drives interest rates, the economy, or is the Fed keeping them low. I'd probably step aside from that. But I would remind the gentleman that called in and all listeners, there's a great Four Seasons tune from the 60s. It's called "Let's Hang On to What We've Got." I love that tune, and that's what I remind people. It might be a good idea to try to evaluate where you are today and figure out ways that working with the low interest rates, I don't argue that, to try to hang on, to what you've got, and there comes a time, there's a growth cycle that we go through, and then there's a cycle that we go through where we really just want to make sure that we don't lose anything, and perhaps working with an advisor, you can get some ideas on how that might be effectively to help you out and get you through the remainder of your life.
And one of the things I always say when we have an interview, especially this kind of interview where the information during the course of the interview can not in any way give you everything you need, the book is what we're really trying to get you to look at. Take a look at the book. It's called The Baby Boomer's Guide to a Rockin' and Rollin' Retirement. It's written by Danny Smith. We've got like 2 minutes left. I know you have to do a statement, but I wanted to know, how do you get the book? Do you have a website?
We have a website. You can go to Rockin' Rollin' Retirement, ROCKIN, rockinrollinretirement.com. You can get a free chapter of the book. I'd encourage anybody to do that because it doesn't cost you a nickel. And from there, I can go on Amazon.com. We were #1 bestseller last year. We're very proud of that. Plus the fact we've had so much fun with the book, guys. So many great interviews like you guys. People I've met that I would have never met had I not done the book. So it's been on my bucket list. I'm glad I did it. I do have to mention, however, that I offer securities and advisory services through a separate entity, Mutual of Omaha Investor Services, Inc., a member of FINRA and SIPC. And it's been a delight to be on the air with you folks this morning.
Okay. Danny, thank you for being on the air. Good luck with the book. And if you're ever in our area of the state, come on down and come into the studio. We'd love to have an interview in the studio.
I would love to do that. Keep on rocking, guys.
All right. Thank you. We'll